Wild horses are powerful animals and symbols of the American West. They roam the open land and run freely. This was until one day when the wild horses were forced to flee to save their lives. This is when ranchers and the US government used helicopters to deal with the invasion of millions of wild horses. Since the 1970s, wild horse populations have increased far beyond equilibrium in the ecosystem of the American West. As a result, native wildlife and plants are forced to compete with invasive species like wild horse populations. This war has exacerbated the problem and the region's drought. According to the US Bureau of Land Management, there are around 95,000 wild horses on public lands across the United States, half of which are in Nevada. But in reality, there are around 300,000 horses roaming freely across various jurisdictions across the country, including on tribal lands. That's more than 3 times the number of horses the federal government considers sustainable for a healthy ecosystem. Most of the United States' estimated wild horses live on large tracts of government-controlled land in the American West. Although the land seems limitless, the Bureau of Land Management says the resources here only allow a certain number of animals to survive. Horses aren't the only animals on the range. The other cattle also need to share the living environment. To maximize public land available for cattle grazing, they decided to track down thousands of wild horses and impound them each year. This creates a vicious cycle. Rounding up and imprisoning thousands of wild horses each year causes the wild horse populations to decline to near extinction. However, scientists have discovered that the roundup has actually caused the wild horse population to reproduce at a higher rate than normal. This is a phenomenon called compensatory reproduction. In other words, farmers and the US government are continuing to create the problem they themselves are complaining about. Before wild horses set foot here, cattle comfortably enjoyed the space. When wild horses come to any grassland, what they leave behind is a desolate land. The appearance of wild horses has caused the cattle to run out of food. Ranchers in Nevada tried injecting birth control pills into female wild horses, in the hope that it would stop them from reproducing. The contraceptive devices and darts they use cost about $30 USD per wild horse, much cheaper than keeping them locked up. Wild horses need new birth control each year. The budget of wild horse prevention programs has skyrocketed from $19.8 million in 2001 to 118 million USD in 2023. Each year, the government continues to pump millions into a cycle of rounding up and culling. It is endless and ineffective. For nearly 5 decades, the Bureau of Land Management has used helicopters to round up wild horses, put them in traps, and stock them at detention facilities. The program to support the capture of wild horses is bringing convenience to the livestock industry in all aspects. From farms that graze cattle on public lands, when wild horses are eliminated, this makes millions for hunters from rounding up wild horses, to companies that keep wild horses in stables for millions of dollars each year. The terrain these wild horses inhabit is not suitable for circling or climbing ropes. Let's say the cowboys get in close enough to tie them up. Once the rope is wrapped around the horse's neck and they try to run, it is common for the neck to break. Have you ever seen a helicopter circling overhead? Even at a distance, the steady thunder of the propellers evokes a primal fear. Wild horses can be overwhelmed by the brutal power of the machine as the loud blasts of wind and noise fill the air. This technique involves approaching wild horses in a carefully measured, threatening manner. Ranchers will stimulate neighboring herds of wild horses to form a larger herd to capture all at once. With directional pressure from their natural escape behavior, groups of wild horses will be guided into traps by helicopters. The wild horses are experiencing terror. Horses are prey that flee from predatory threats. They usually don't stay and fight because their defenses are limited to kicking or biting. Instead, their reaction is to immediately run away and keep their distance from the threat. Of course, there isn't any hunting, and if you're not careful, casualties will occur. During each roundup, traveling long distances at speeds faster than walking or occasionally galloping can be difficult for foals, pregnant mares, as well as older or more disabled horses. Members may be separated from their herds and left behind. Agitated wild horses will rush quickly into small traps that can also cause injury. Arresting by helicopter is the best way, but it cannot be denied that this is also the cruelest. But ranchers and the US government still have to do it. There are millions of acres here, but not every acre produces forage for wild horses. Like any wild species, humans must manage them to keep them from becoming overpopulated or diseased. After the raids, the Land Management Department transported the wild horses to a short-term detention facility. If licensed by the state, these facilities will bring operators about $20,000 per day, equivalent to $7.3 million annually, and just to keep wild horses. Despite these exorbitant costs, the government is still working to secure more private mudflats. Wild horses that are long-term residents of short-term confinement will age and die in their stables. Some wild horses are sold or transferred to long-term private pastures. More than 60,000 wild horses are currently stored in long-term captive breeding facilities across the country. While the average helicopter raid costs between $800 to $1,000 per wild horse, baiting is less expensive, at about half the cost. Regardless of the method, however, feral horse removal for the federal government is a lucrative business, generating large profits for some cattle ranchers in Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon. The wild horse floats in the air. That's not something you see very often in your life. Not only do they round up wild horses, helicopters are also used to rescue them. As well as the United States, using helicopters to manage cattle is a popular method in Australia, especially on large livestock farms. This is an effective way to move and monitor cattle over large areas. Helicopters will provide a bird's-eye view, allowing farmers to monitor cattle health and behaviour, check fences, or easily find missing or injured cattle. It is especially easy to control wild animals that attack grazing areas like wild horses. Wild horses have the ability to hunt for resources and are surprisingly adaptable to their environment. That is the very reason why they are such a problem. Their awesomeness is the cause. When placing all wildlife in one environment, wild horses still have an advantage over other species that are wandering and needy. Although the invasion of wild horses in the US shows no signs of decreasing, in the short term, rounding up by helicopter is an effective measure to prevent the growth of wild horse populations. It helps to buy time, so ranchers and the government can search for more optimal methods. Beef is a nutritious and widely loved food. Demand is increasing globally, leading to production pressure on beef producers. Watch today's video to see how farmers process millions of tons of beef each year. Brazil today is the world's largest exporter of beef, accounting for 23% of total global exports. At the same time, Brazil has one of the largest and most sustainable cattle herds in the world. It is estimated that the country's beef cattle herd has 213.6 million heads. The development of the beef cattle industry creates many economic opportunities for farmers. With its vast territory, favourable climate and strong cattle culture, Brazil is poised to capture a growing share of the global market. Besides the world's leading developed country like the US, Brazilian beef cattle farming has also benefited greatly from technological advances in the past decades. These are grassland management and diversification, as well as livestock breeding and genetic selection. Beef cattle enjoy good nutrition thanks to the abundance of open pastures. Different breeds of cattle have been carefully selected and bred to thrive in local tropical conditions. Beef cattle in Brazil typically graze outdoors year-round until a few months before slaughter, and nearly 90% of all Brazilian beef is grass-fed. Because grass-fed beef is beneficial for rumen health and is cheaper than grain, year-round access to pasture also respects their natural behaviour and actively promotes the health and welfare of beef cattle. Brazil's high-quality, hormone-free beef cattle are exported to 154 countries globally. The main candidates leading this effort are Brazil's largest meat packers. It accounts for about 35% of the country's beef production and about 85% of beef exports. For some countries, a growing beef cattle industry is a good thing, but not so in Brazil. It's true, pastures for beef cattle and other livestock are devouring natural ecosystems at an ever-increasing rate. This causes serious damage to biodiversity and climate. In addition, land clearing to have more pasture for livestock is one of the main causes of Amazon forest fires. Brazil follows the US, with 10.35 million tons of beef produced in 2023. Despite having the world's largest commercial beef herd, Brazil lags behind the US and other countries in livestock productivity. When they raise beef cattle, low-tech operations invest little in the land, resulting in pastures that can lose their ability to provide food for animals after just 3 or 4 years. Next on the list is Australia, with 1.88 million tonnes of beef produced in 2023. The country has a herd of about 24 million cows, which is a solid base for beef production. Large areas of natural grassland and advanced breeding systems ensure high-quality beef production. Australia produces 4% of global beef production and accounts for about 16% of world trade. The major markets for this product are usually China, Japan, the United States, Korea, and Indonesia. Now we come to Queensland, which accounts for 46% of Australia's total cattle population. Thanks to advances in information and communication technology, Queensland cattle farmers still ensure competitiveness with businesses. Queensland's red meat industry makes an important contribution to Australia's local economy. Across the subcommittee, there are more than 50 abattoirs and 200 accredited meat processing businesses, as well as nearly 1,000 retail butchers. At the end of the breeding season, the beef cattle are slaughtered by the farm, and each piece of meat is cut according to the safest procedures. Beef is processed after inspection and filtered after cutting. The product is then carefully packaged and frozen at -30 degrees Celsius, ready to be brought to customers. Australia's meat processing industry is a world leader in beef processing, with about 300 slaughterhouses and 34,000 workers. Packaging plants use the latest technologies to continuously improve production efficiency. One beef cow can produce more than 1,500 recommended daily servings of beef. Whole beef cuts are chilled and then vacuum sealed, packaged to maintain freshness and quality and to ensure extended shelf life. Strict temperature control is maintained throughout the delivery process, helping to inhibit bacterial growth and giving Australian beef a shelf life of up to 120 days under optimal storage conditions. Next, we go to Argentina, the land of wine and beef. On more than 290,000 square miles of lush pastures in South America, millions of Argentine beef cattle graze. Beef farming has propelled the country into international markets as one of the world's largest beef exporters. With diverse flora and fauna and temperatures that rarely reach extremes, the Pampas are ideal year-round grazing land for Argentina's prized cattle. Much of the beef here is grass-fed, a nutrient-rich forage diet that minimizes the need for antibiotics. In this country, beef is a symbol of national pride. It brings people together. This is the world's second largest beef consumer, with an average annual consumption of 120 pounds per person. And although most beef is consumed domestically, the country still ranks as the world's 5th largest exporter, worth $3 billion. A big reason why Argentinian beef is so delicious is because it is produced by small farmers who raise cattle on family farms. Beef cattle are grass-fed for up to 18 months or until they are ready for slaughter. Beef cattle are ready for sale when they reach a weight of around 950 pounds to 1,000 pounds. At the factory, beef cattle are processed into different types of beef, such as ribs or tenderloin. The unique flavour of Argentinian beef comes from the muscle, not the fat. It is also the most highly regarded imported beef globally, second only to Wagyu in Japan. But it has a much more affordable price. Amid the forests and grasslands of Western Russia, farmers produce tons of high-quality beef. Russia holds the 10th position in the top beef-producing countries in the world, with an output of 1.62 million tons in 2023. Russia has a herd of beef cattle that provides a solid base for the factory, with around 18 million slaughtered. Russia invests heavily in technology and infrastructure for beef production, meaning output is expected to continue to increase in the coming years. Compared to the US or other countries, beef production in Russia is largely based on dairy farming combined with beef breeds. Of course, this is not as effective as purebred breeding. Therefore, the beef production industry in this country is gradually shifting to raising entirely beef cattle. Currently, beef cattle are raised in 66 regions of the Russian Federation. The largest number of beef cattle is concentrated in the Southern Federal District, accounting for 35% of the total beef cattle population in the country. The application of technologies aimed at intensive farming and fattening contributes to promoting growth in beef production. When beef cattle arrive at the production plant, they are first taken to the slaughter area. This room marks where the cattle will become fresh beef. Then comes the processing area. On the processing line, each worker is responsible for cutting beef into small cubes for easy packaging and preservation.